She made you apologize to a knife. An actual chef's knife you'd been using on the wrong side of the board. You did it out loud, to the knife, and the strange part isn't that she asked. The strange part is that by then, it felt completely reasonable. You meet her at a party when you're 31. She tells you your opinion is wrong before she tells you her name. 4 days later, she texts, "You free Saturday? Wear something warm." No question mark. No context. You say yes without asking why. You've spent your entire adult life in rooms where the trick is to seem enthusiastic and interested, and fine. You're good at it. She's from Glasgow. She's not interested in that version of you, and she's not subtle about it. This is either going to be a disaster, or it's going to be the most honest thing that's ever happened to you. She takes you to her local pub on the second date. You know it's the second date because the first was a coffee she described as fine, which you understand later means she decided to give you another chance. The pub is on a narrow street in the West End, and everyone there knows her by name, and nobody extends that to you. You order a whiskey on the rocks. The table goes quiet, not dramatically, not with gasping, just quiet. She doesn't correct you. She lets the silence do it. You laugh it off. She watches to see if you can. This is, you're figuring out how she assesses people. She says something or does something and then waits to see what you do with it. Most people get defensive. You laugh. She notes this without smiling. The conversation moves fast. She has opinions about Scottish independence the way a structural engineer has opinions about load-bearing walls, not argumentative. Just settled, like she's describing something that is simply true and it would be strange to suggest otherwise. You mention a position you hold. She tells you it's wrong, explains why in 2 sentences, then asks what you actually think as opposed to what you've been assuming. It takes a moment to understand these are different questions. You think about that on the drive home. She works in urban planning or policy or something that requires actual knowledge. The exact shape of it becomes clearer over time than it is tonight. What is clear tonight is that she is the first person in some time who makes you feel like your thinking needs to be in better condition. This is either very attractive or a warning. You go with attractive. She texts you 4 days later. "You free Saturday? Wear something warm." No question mark. No indication of where or why warmth is required. You say yes immediately. 6 months later, her things were in your bathroom. 3 of her friends knew your name before you'd met any of them. And her mother had apparently made a decision about you that nobody had thought to mention yet. 6 months in, you use the word havering correctly in a sentence. You don't plan it. It comes out mid-conversation, the way words do when you've been absorbing a new vocabulary without realizing. She raises one eyebrow. This is, it turns out, the highest praise she gives. You discover she told her mother about you at the 3-month mark from the mother herself at breakfast, while Catriona is on the phone in the other room clearly talking about something else. Her mother is cheerful about this. She explains the timeline as though it's completely normal to have committed a person's name to the family record before that person has thought to commit anything at all. You smile and pour more tea. The tea is wrong, but that's a problem for another day. She operates on a timeline that doesn't involve consulting you. She knows things before she says them, decides things before she announces them, arrives at conclusions while you're still framing the question. You are always catching up, which is exhausting and, you've noticed, never boring. You propose properly the ring, the speech, the restaurant that took 3 weeks to book. She says yes. Then, "I told my mum 6 months ago, but I appreciate the gesture." You are learning that with Catriona, your romantic moments come with footnotes. The wedding planning is its own education. Your vision involves somewhere comfortable, people who know each other, a reasonable finish time. Her vision involves a venue in Perthshire she's had in mind since before she met you. A ceilidh band with a specific fiddler whose name she mentions as though you'd recognize it, and a guest list that includes people described only as family connections, who represent obligations you can't trace. You suggest, gently, simplification. She looks at you the way someone looks at a sentence that doesn't quite parse. Her family arrives 4 days before the wedding. Her father takes you aside within the first hour and asks one question. "Rangers or Celtic?" "You don't know." He nods once slowly. It is impossible to tell what this means. 4 days later at the wedding itself, in a Highland venue you hadn't known existed before you met her, there is apparently going to be a ceremony involving a sword. The Gay Gordons requires you to hold your partner's hand above your head and turn in a specific direction. The direction matters. You turn the wrong way. The chain of couples behind you doesn't break so much as compress rapidly, and somewhere in the compression is an elderly woman who goes by Auntie Morag and who you will not speak of again for the rest of the evening. Nobody acknowledges that this happened. Everyone saw it. Her cousin says something in Scots that makes the glasses shake. You laugh. This is apparently the correct response. Her father glances at you from across the room with an expression that could be described, generously, as a reduced degree of skepticism. Later, in the hotel, it's just Catriona. Not the family's representative, just the woman who texted "wear something warm" 6 months ago, which at the time you read as logistical instruction and was apparently an invitation to the rest of your life. She's laughing about Auntie Morag. Her accent is softer at this hour. She tells you she loves you without any decoration around it. The way she says everything she actually means, which you're learning is a significantly narrower category than it sounds. You don't say anything for a moment. This feels like the right response. For the honeymoon, you stay in her family's house in Perthshire, which is the kind of house where the kitchen is described as the new part, having been added sometime in the late 20th century. Her relatives rotate through with whiskey and strong opinions. You stop trying to demonstrate competence and start asking questions instead. This, it turns out, is the correct strategy. Burns night arrives. You've practiced the address to the haggis for 2 weeks and deliver it in the kitchen with moderate confidence. Her father corrects your pronunciation in 3 places quietly, without interrupting, 1 word after each stanza. The 3rd correction comes with a small nod. You will understand later that this was the acceptance ceremony. One evening, her relatives fall into a conversation so fast and thick with Scots that you catch maybe 1 word in 6. You smile and nod for 20 minutes. Catriona sits beside you, following every word. She doesn't translate. You don't ask. Something sits between you that neither of you names, and then her uncle refills your glass and the moment passes. You don't think about it again for a long time. Back in the city, you unlock the flat. It looks different than it did before the wedding, and not only because her things are in it. Something has been rearranged that doesn't appear on any shelf. 2 things are immediately clear. The cast iron pan is not going anywhere, and neither is she. Your flat doesn't look the way you left it, and you don't mean this only as a description of the furniture. Her cast iron pan has replaced yours on the hob. The shelves now contain tonics in their distinctive foil, a brand of tea you hadn't encountered before she moved in, a jar of something with a label that suggests strong opinions, and what she describes as essentials taking up most of what used to be your shelf. The flat smells like someone has been making soup from scratch all afternoon. This is because someone has been making soup from scratch all afternoon. You don't hate this. That's the part you can't quite account for. Your flat has become a different country, and you have no particular objection, which probably says more about where you were before than where you are now. Your friend Jamie comes over in March, stops mid-sentence, and asks if you've been saying "I." You have been. You didn't notice. He takes a slow look at the bookshelves, the pan, the tea configuration, the bowl on the counter that could be from a market in any number of European cities, but is definitely not from IKEA. "Mate," Jamie says, "your flat looks like something that would be reviewed in a magazine." You're about to explain that it's just, and then Catriona walks in mid-conversation on her phone in Scots, completely at home, and you realize he has a point. The work situation is more complicated. The annual company golf day is announced in April. Attendance is not explicitly mandatory in any document you have access to, but everyone understands what "strongly encouraged" means in practice. You try to explain this to Catriona, the way these things work, the invisible architecture of professional goodwill, the logic of being present for things that don't matter, so that you matter for things that do. She listens to all of it. Then she asks one question. "Do you actually enjoy any of that?" You don't answer immediately. That's the answer. She looks at you with an expression you're still learning to read, not contempt, not pity, something closer to concern. She says, not unkindly, that in her experience, the kind of system requiring you to spend your Saturday pretending to enjoy golf with people you wouldn't otherwise choose to spend time with is a system that has decided your time belongs to it. She doesn't understand why you accept this. You don't know how to explain that you've never seriously considered the alternative. You go. She stays home. You come back in the early evening and she is reading. She asks how it was. "Fine," you say. She nods and looks back at her book. Something between you has been made visible that neither of you has named yet, and the naming is what you've both just agreed to postpone. She doesn't say she won't go to the golf day. She says she'd rather not spend her evening performing comfort around people she hasn't chosen. This is her position, stated once, without anger. You say this is different, this is how careers are built. She says any system requiring you to demonstrate friendship with people you barely like in order to advance is not a system that deserves that kind of loyalty. You tell her she doesn't understand how it works. She says she understands exactly how it works. That's why she doesn't do it. You go. She stays home. At the dinner, someone whose name you should probably know by now asks where your wife is. You say she's not really into this kind of thing. You say it the way you say anything else that evening, easily, without pausing, and it's not until the drive home that you hear what you actually said. Not, she disagrees with this. Not, she has other priorities. You described her principles as a preference. Your colleagues didn't know the difference, and you let that stand. That's the part you don't tell her. You come home. She's reading with a glass of her good Isla. She asks how it was. You say fine. She doesn't say anything. She pours you 2 fingers without being asked. This somehow makes it worse. 2 days of careful quiet, not hostile. Just the kind of silence that has a shape. Then you're at a conference bar 3 days later, staring at a whiskey menu that's mostly blends she would consider an act of violence against the category. You photograph it and send it with no caption. She replies 4 minutes later, a photo of the good Isla on the coffee table at home, 1 glass already poured. 2 words, come back. No question mark. You call her instead. You talk that night. Not argue. Talk. 2 things said that hadn't been said in 8 months of trying. You tell her you don't know how to be with someone who sees through everything. That you've spent your whole working life in rooms where a certain amount of opacity is the price of admission, and she doesn't charge that, and it makes you feel like you're the only person standing there without a coat. She tells you she's terrified of being softened by compromise. That she moved here already halfway to someone she doesn't recognize. That losing her own edges, slowly, in the name of adjustment, is the thing she doesn't know how to survive. It doesn't solve anything. It opens something. A deal. 1 night a week her world, no half measures. 1 night a week yours, same terms. She picks baseball. Sits through 4 innings saying nothing. Says eventually it's almost meditative, not a compliment, but not nothing. She came home that first Thursday in November smelling like she'd just had the best evening of her week. She was happy in a way that didn't need explaining, and you hadn't been any part of it. Her mother arrives in December with a tin of shortbread that has clearly survived multiple decades of service, opinions about the state of your kitchen sponge, and a suitcase suggesting she is staying considerably longer than the weekend you were told about. She is cheerful about all of this. She makes tea within 11 minutes of arriving. She uses Catriona's loose leaf, brews it in a pot, watches the color, and pours it at the exact moment she has determined is correct. You offer her a mug. She looks at it the way an engineer looks at a structural flaw someone hoped she wouldn't notice. You learn over 4 days that her mother's disapproval operates at a frequency only partially audible. She doesn't criticize.
She adjusts.
The kettle moves. The tea towels are folded in thirds now. She asks, at one point, if you've considered a different brand of butter in a tone that makes clear this is not a question but a correction delivered in the shape of one. By day 3, you have been gently reformed in ways you can't catalog. Catriona watches all of this with an expression that falls somewhere between amusement and very precise recognition. She likes you, Catriona says on the 3rd night. You do not feel liked. You feel reviewed. Hogmanay comes. Catriona's friends arrive, a group you've met in fragments over the past year but never assembled in full. The music gets louder. Someone produces a bottle with no label and a color that suggests it was not made recently. At midnight, Catriona is across the room laughing at something her friend Kirsty said, and you watch her in a crowd of people who know her completely and understand, not with jealousy, not with sadness, but with something more precise than either that she is fully herself here in a way she is not quite fully herself with you. Not because she's hiding, because these people don't require translation. You stand holding an unlabeled glass and understand for the first time clearly that she has built a life in this city that functions with or without you at its center. Her Thursday nights, her friends, her mother's easy certainty that Catriona will always be Catriona regardless of who she married. She is not dependent on this marriage for her identity. She is choosing it. These are not the same thing, and you are only now no longer confusing them. She calls her cousin at 1 a.m. from the kitchen. You hear her voice shift registers warmer, faster, fully at home. You stand in the doorway listening to a version of your wife that has no use for your understanding. She has stopped asking if things are okay. You haven't noticed until now. 3 days later, she mentions a job in Edinburgh. The Edinburgh job is real. Senior Housing Policy Analyst, 14-month contract with extension likely, based 15 minutes from her parents by train. She shows you the email on a Wednesday evening as though it's logistical information, either an act of composure or proof she's already decided and is watching what you'll do. You ask if she'd take it. She asks if you'd come. You say you'd try. The word sits on the table between you. She looks at it. She knows what try means. You know she knows. The argument that follows is not about Edinburgh. It moves the way the real arguments move, beginning somewhere manageable, finding the actual question underneath, staying there longer than either of you planned. You say she makes decisions with the room already cleared of anyone who might complicate them. She says every room you walk into, you fill it with a practiced version of yourself, and after 2 years she still can't always tell where the performance ends. That one takes a moment to land. Then you tell her. The golf dinner. The colleague who asked where she was. She's not really into this kind of thing. You tell her in the middle of this argument, which is the wrong time, except you've been carrying it for months like a stone in a coat pocket, and it comes out now. She goes quiet in the way she goes quiet when something has clarified something else. You described me, she says finally, as a preference. You say you know. I don't hold the positions I hold out of preference. They're not a personality trait. They're not her thing. They're mine, the substance of who I am, and you stood in a room full of people and turned them into an eccentricity. There is nothing to say that isn't a lesser version of what she just said. You say nothing. She pours 2 glasses from the Isla and sets one in front of you. This is the form her care takes, not warmth as performance or niceness, but warmth as a refusal to abandon someone who has just let her down. She gives you the glass not because you've earned it, but because she's decided that's who she is. She says, I don't need you to become anything. I need you to actually be something. You understand what she has been offering from the beginning. Not an invitation to perform a better version of yourself. Permission to be an actual one. The following Tuesday, she emails Edinburgh. You hear about it that evening between dinner and dishes. You ask why. Wasn't the right time, she says. You ask if it was because of you. She looks at you. It was because of me. That Sunday she makes Cranachan. You watch her from the doorway. Something has changed in a way you don't have language for yet. Her mother texts something that makes her smile, the kind you haven't seen before. She doesn't show you the message. 2 years in, you order your whiskey correctly without pausing to calculate it. Nobody marks this. There is no acknowledgement. You are simply at a bar one evening, the question is asked, and the answer that comes out is the right one arrived at from somewhere real, rather than somewhere rehearsed. You have changed in the following ways. You no longer attend the company golf day, and you have not been fired. You say I, reflexively in conversation, and have stopped apologizing for it. You used the word out with in a work email in October, and while you're still aware this happened, you did not remove it. You have been to 3 Kayleys and can now execute the gay Gordons without injuring bystanders. She has changed in the following ways. She sat through a full baseball game in June and developed opinions about the infield shift that she will share if asked and occasionally when not asked. She gave a keynote in Dublin and referred in passing to a friend from home, meaning Edinburgh, which she noticed as she said it, corrected immediately, and has not repeated. Neither of you became the other one. You just moved closer to your own edges. She didn't improve you through patience or love or accommodation. She didn't have a project. She simply refused to live inside performance. And over time that made performance unsustainable, and what was underneath the actual person, with actual preferences and actual opinions, became easier to maintain than the alternative. The honesty happened the way most real change happens, by environment, not intention. You were changed by each other's accuracy, by being seen steadily, without flattery, until the distance between who you were performing and who you actually were became too small to bother maintaining. She gave you a birthday card in January that said, to someone adequately functional on his best days. You keep it in a drawer with things you expect to still have in 20 years. You married someone who doesn't need you. You worked out eventually that this is the only way to know that being wanted actually means something. The thing nobody tells you about marrying someone honest is that you never have to wonder. The worst thing about marrying someone honest is exactly the same. If this one stayed with you, like and drop a comment where you're watching from. Subscribe for more.